Canadians are usually seen in a pretty great light, their morality as high as their house prices, but not everything in their history is all sunshine and syrup. Back in 1942, while the world was going to war over in Europe, Canada had itself quite a domestic display of detrimental dread that would cause suffering for over a decade. The Canadian government was making a push to set nutritional standards across the board for all Canadians, setting a baseline for a healthy and nutritious diet so that little lads and ladies could grow up to be formidable fellas and fellettes. It was around this time that breakthroughs in vitamin and mineral isolation were being made, allowing individual supplements to come to market. So, what's this one called? Oh, that's vitamin A. Huh, vitamin A. Neat. Research surrounding the daily recommended intake amounts of such supplements was critical to give proper recommendations for general public consumption. Not only that, but researchers were curious if these supplements could provide additional health benefits outside of just maintaining normal bodily function. In order to test the true advantages of these nutrients, you needed a night and day comparison, both strong and healthy subjects and malnourished ones. Very malnourished ones. Enter Canadian nutritionist and biochemist Lionel Pett. He heard whispers of severe malnutrition amongst various indigenous populations in the Great White North, particularly in the northern region of the province of Manitoba. He brought along a couple buddies. He had Dr. Percy Moore, a medical superintendent in the Department of Indigenous Affairs, as well as famed nutritionist and pediatrician Dr. Frederick Tisdall. Together, the three men set out to investigate the claims. What they found was nothing short of tragic. To say that these people were starving would be an understatement. The level of malnutrition was crippling. Elders were completely bedridden, children had their growth drastically stunted, and even the able-bodied adults were barely able to function. This led the indigenous population to experience dramatically disproportionate death rates, nearly 52 times the rate of tuberculosis deaths, 8 times the national rate of infant mortality, and 5 times the overall death rate. And that wasn't all. Hunger in the state-sponsored boarding schools for the indigenous children was a constant plague. Thanks to intentional underfunding from the Canadian federal government, these schools were incapable of providing decent food for students. Some schools were noted having no refrigeration or appliances, no basic sanitation, or even trained kitchen staff. School children had no choice but to consume food that was practically inedible. Soggy scraps of bread and old water, rancid bits of meat, and rotting vegetables were the norm. Children were estimated to only be consuming around 1,200 calories a day if they were lucky. That's well below even the bare minimum recommended caloric intake of 1,400 calories a day. Approximately 28% of the girls and 70% of the boys were reported as underweight for their age. But instead of bringing these issues, the very obvious root of school-wide malnutrition to light, Pett, Moore, and Tisdall saw these withering children and thought, "Great, there's our test subjects." And so they got to work. Their goals? Study the negative effects of malnutrition itself and if they could be positively offset by nutrient-fortified foods. Together, the three men gathered data points using over 1,000 Indigenous children from several boarding schools across Canada. Blood samples, physical exams, and aptitude tests, all used to establish a baseline across 2 years. 2 grueling years of known malnutrition for the sake of data collection. Imagine doctors coming to your school, seeing you skin and bones, your brown teeth glistening in the incandescent light, and telling you that they're going to help. But in 2 years. Insane. In 1948, Moore and Tisdall began their experimental design. Until Tisdall bit the dust a year later in 1949. He was 55. At the Port Alberni Residential School, students were noticed to have an abnormal riboflavin deficiency as a result of lack of dairy and vegetables. Riboflavin, also known as vitamin B2, helps the body convert food into energy. So the kids were given triple the amount of dairy milk allowance. That's it, just more milk. The Shubenacadie School, crazy name as it is, showed lower measures of ascorbic acid, or vitamin C, in its respective blood sampling. Vitamin C is pretty important for your immune system, helps prevent you from getting all the icky sickies. Half of these students received vitamin C tablets, the other, placebos. Children at the blood school were pretty low in vitamin B1. Also known as thiamine, vitamin B1 plays a vital role in cellular growth and development. They were given a tasty vitamin B fortified flour. Eat up. Similar to Port Alberni, St. Mary's children also lacked riboflavin, but instead of milk, these kiddos were given a fortified flour containing bone meal, which wasn't even legal for sale under Canadian law. Finally, the very unfortunate students at St. Paul de Métis were left with no changes whatsoever. They were the control group. Sorry, guys. Despite the knowledge of the severe lack of quality of nutrition at each and every one of these schools, no additional interventions outside of these supplements were ever made. In fact, many of the staff were actually instructed to withhold any access to dental hygiene for the students, lest it skew their data. None of these children were ever informed that they were being treated as glorified lab rats, nor had any parents ever been told about these experiments. It was all a secret. These experiments lasted for 5 years. 5 years of continued and deliberate malnutrition of children. To no surprise, many died. Even before the experiments, death was prevalent in these schools. And yet, the studies continued, finally concluding in 1953. The results? No breakthroughs, no discoveries, nothing medically valuable that wasn't already known to the healthcare community. Ultimately, the results were inconclusive at best. The suffering was pointless and fruitless. Ashamed of his worthless work, Dr. Percy Moore kept the studies hidden. It wasn't until 2013 when historian Dr. Ian Mosby uncovered the studies and made them public to the world, 60 years after the experiments had ended. Because the research remained hidden for the rest of their lives, both Dr. Pett and Dr. Moore continued to have successful careers, remaining prominent Canadian healthcare figures. Moore died in 1987 from Alzheimer's at the age of 88, and Pett died in 2003 at the age of 93. Probably because he was old as dirt. Harsh criticism came after their work was revealed, sure, but too little, too late.